Hey everybody, it's Matt Robinson. Welcome to another edition of the Writer's Block. I got my game jersey on. This is a big one. This is one of my big musical and literary heroes, Fred LeBlanc from Cowboy Mouth, one of my favorite bands. Fred is a drummer, singer, songwriter, band leader, civic supporter, inspiration, and children's book author. So that's how we got him here. The founding frontman of Cowboy Mouth, he's brought the diverse sounds and indomitable spirit of his native New Orleans to people around the world. Upcoming stops include Napa, California, August 15th, my hometown of Boston, August 26th. I will be there. New York on the 27th, and shows in Pennsylvania, August 28th and 9th. Information, of course, at cowboymouth.com. His book, Fred the New Orleans Drummer Boy, takes readers on a tour of his beloved home city while encouraging them to focus on friendship and mutual support. As a longtime fan who's also written a children's book about drumming, it has been a long-awaited honor to have him on the show. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, Matt. That was pretty good. I've never been called anybody's literary hero before.
Well, I mean, we got to stick together.
So it's a new day.
So how has your native New Orleanian culture influenced your music and your outlook on life?
Well, I think a lot of what I kind of came up with on my own in terms of understanding the influence of the area. Growing up in New Orleans, you kind of march to a different beat because there's so many different beats everywhere. Like growing up, even if you're a kid from the slight suburbs like I was, you go to Mardi Gras parades and there's just rhythm. People in New Orleans just kind of move differently because we experience kind of rhythm and music and anything like that very personally because it's almost a physical connection. And that was my experience with it. And growing up, I was always very drawn to kind of things that would empower people. I grew up Catholic, and that was, there was a lot of conflict in there because, the Catholic Church, the teachings of, Jesus, I find a lot of resonance in them that really talks to me a lot. I've read that and the Ten Commandments. Not that I've always been perfect by any means, but I find those really resonated with me from a very young age. But at the same time, seeing the Catholic Church as mostly and experiencing it mostly as a control mechanism, throughout my life, that really turned me off to that institutionalization of that kind of thing. It's just like, okay, here's the institution that keeps everybody in control. We want all your money and you're going to worship us. Oh, and by the way, we're going to have sex with your kids. It's just, sorry, Matt.
No, and being in Boston, I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and I had to, for a long time, that was troubling to me on several levels that I won't get into. But I always had a longing to kind of reach something greater that I knew that those ideas would kind of push me through if I could get through this other bullshit. And so I used to, there was a gospel television show that came on before Bugs Bunny in the morning in New Orleans. It was like, and it was a repeat of the previous Sunday service. And it was kind of like, the Baptist kind of the African-American Black kind of gospel churches. And I saw them, it was like, okay, these people, whatever it is they're doing, they're just kind of releasing their burdens. And through that, they're finding strength and power to go through another week, year, whatever that was. And I always, for some reason, that really clicked with me. And so I kind of found that as kind of a way of, when I realized that I wanted to pursue music as a profession, as a job, I wanted to make sure that what I did kind of helped others touch that part of themselves, that part that resonates towards something greater.
Right.
Not that, I wasn't the big deal. Whatever I was doing was not the big deal. I'm just kind of a conduit for something else,
Hmm.
and I've always tried to use my music for that. I didn't always succeed. I was in a band in the 80s, late 80s, called Dash Rip Rock, which is a great band, and I loved it, and I've appreciated it more since I left. But it was also very much a very punk rock thing that I loved. I love punk rock, but as I progressed in my career and my performing career, I realized that as much as I loved punk rock, it was like the analogy I had in my head was a really beautiful 1955 Cadillac driving 80 miles an hour straight into a brick wall. It was kind of like you had all this feeling, you had all this energy, and just nowhere to go. It was like, okay, well, where do you go? Because, I never did subscribe to the ethos of, live fast, die young, and leave a beautiful corpse. I always thought that's kind of stupid. I'd like to stick around. And so once I kind of started figuring out with Cowboy Mouth that I would have to be a front man, I realized, okay, I don't want to do the typical thing. I don't know what to do. It wasn't something I'd ever really planned to do. I had no great desire to be a front man. I knew that I wrote songs. I knew that I sang songs. I knew I wanted to perform those songs and for people to hear those songs. And finally, when I formed Cowboy Mouth after a year and a half of pretty much everything I touched turned to shit, I was like, but I was lucky enough to get this thing together, and I was like, okay, how do I approach this? And then at the time, I'd been reading a lot of Norman Vincent Peale, which is kind of like inspirational literature. And I'm not trying to push any belief system on anybody or anything like that. It's just saying what worked for me. There's a lot of different paths to get to the same goal, but this is what worked for me. So it's like, so instead of doing the front man thing, yeah, everybody's gonna get out, we're gonna get wasted at a party, everybody. It's like, we're having a great time. Believe in yourself and anything's possible. All right, we get in. And I noticed that when I did that stuff, the effect was immediate. It was like, whoa, people weren't expecting that, and it really, the effect was almost visceral. The response was really intense. It was like, I was like, okay, people seem to want this. Let me go further in this direction. And so it was kind of the path that I found myself on, balancing the whole rock band thing, front guy thing, with trying to put something constructive out there that would benefit people in the long run as opposed to bleed them. And I
Yeah.
think on the one hand, we've been very fortunate. We've been very successful. It's been an up and down ride, as it always is in a rock band.
Right.
But at the same time, we haven't ever gotten that giant, big payday. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure personally that I would have survived that had that
Hmm.
happened.
Hmm.
Because I wasn't always drawn to the better side of myself, and I think in time it was kind of like, okay, kind of thank the Lord for unanswered prayers kind of thing, and here I am all these years later. I still get to do it. I still get to play my songs. I still get to play with people I enjoy playing with, John Griffith, Brian Broussard, Frank Grachalski. I still get to work with people that I love to work with. People still come see us. I can still make a living. I mean, we're not getting rich, but I can pay my bills,
Yeah.
and
You've been at it a while, which is a credit
been
to
at it
your
a
talent
while,
and
and this is
perseverance. So,
honestly, this is all I ever really wanted. I just wanted to be in what I thought was a great rock band, you know, playing songs that I wrote and spreading a good vibe. And so here I am all these years later, and I still get to do it.
yeah.
That's
No,
a
I mean,
that's a miracle.
it's no small thing. I mean, I use your song "Easy" in my boxing classes. I share it with the inmates at the prison where I teach, and they all
Thank you.
stop and listen. Yeah, no, I mean,
Well,
it's always been powerful and a
well,
great beat
thank you.
to punch the poop out of something with.
Well, yeah, that was, look, I'm not trying to. I'll let me say this, but I'm not trying to say, oh, poor pitiful me, because my I always had food on the table. I always had a place to sleep, but I grew up in kind of a volatile household, and it really affected me. I was the youngest one. While my brothers and sister always say that I was spoiled, kind of shit rolls downhill. So look, I'm not complaining, but I was filled with this rage. And then I realized as I got older, this was just energy. And I used it in the book. It's just energy. And where I put it was going to be how it affected me. And when I played in the 80s with that first band, Dash Rip Rock, they weren't my first band. They were my first band that achieved like national notoriety. I realized using that rage to create more rage just kind of fed on itself. And after a while, I realized, if I keep doing this, this is going to kill me. And so I had this rage inside of me that kind of influenced a lot of how I play. Still does. I mean, not that I'm filled with rage these days. I'm able to take that energy that's always been inherent and put it towards hopefully something positive that like strengthens me, strengthens my psyche, and helps maybe to benefit people around me who come see me or play with me or something like that. Look, I'm not trying to say, it's difficult to say things like this because you can easily step over the line of pretension. So I'm just a guy who got really, really lucky, and every day I'm alive, I realize how fortunate I am, and it's just I'm very aware of that, and every show that I get to play with this band, I realize how fortunate I am, and I just try to just spread that appreciation. That's it.
What inspired you to use children's literature as another avenue to express yourself?
It wasn't my idea. It was not my idea. My aunt, my mom's sister, Dottie, she was her younger sister. She's one of these kind of southern matriarch kind of things. She's kind of like the matriarch of our family. And she always, she wasn't those Southerners that rarely pronounced her R's, you know.
Kind of
But
like
she,
we do up here, but in a
yeah,
different
yeah,
way.
yeah, 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 but in a different way. Bah. Anyway, but that's another story for another time.
Mm.
But so she's always been kind of a bit psychic, kind of, and she would get these premonitions. And one day she came to me and she said, "Fred, I think I think you should write a children's book. And I think you should call it Fred the New Orleans Drummer Boy. And I think you ought to use what you do and put it in a children's book form and see what happens. I think it'd be very successful." So I was like, okay, why not? And it turned out I knew a house I had lived in, I had sold to a woman who ran a bookstore in New Orleans, and I called her and said, "Hey, Elizabeth, can you point me in the direction my aunt had this idea?" She's like, "Oh, I know a publisher." So threw me into this publisher. The guy took over the whole thing. It was like, "Yeah, this is a great idea. I think we should do that." It was like, and the whole thing just fell together. I really didn't do anything except write the damn book.
Well,
And
that's a big part of it,
the
though.
publisher Scott helped me write the book, helped me put it in a framework to where it worked in children's literature. So it was like this thing that just happened. It really benefited the band at a time when we needed it.
Mm.
And it was like, the whole thing just kind of happened. It was like, okay, great. And people loved it. In fact, Kevin from Ezra, he came up, he said, "Fred, man, you wrote a children's book. What a brilliant idea." It's like, well, I can't really take credit for it. It was my aunt. I'm just kind of
Well,
riding this train. So, so it was just something that kind of happened. It did really well for us on a local and regional basis. People still buy it. I always hear about it. People enjoy it, and okay, great.
okay, yeah,
At the end of the day, I mean, not to sound cheesy, but we're all just links in the chain. So I'm just trying to make my link as strong as I can.
right. What did you notice about the process of writing the book versus writing a song? Was there similarities and differences, and did one educate the
The
other?
similarities is that the inspiration is pure. When the inspiration is there, it's really, and the inspiration is strong, then the song or the book will almost create itself, and you just kind of have to be there to make sure it doesn't go off the rails. And so that was something I noticed about it. the idea was basically, the character, the bass player in the band is nervous, and it was along that lines of what you and I were just talking about, or most like I was just talking about having that rage, having that energy, and the character experiences, he's scared to perform, even though he's a good bass player, he's scared to play, and the kids come up with the idea of, the energy is going to move in a certain way. It depends on where you put it, and if you experience that as fear, it's going to manifest, it's going to turn into something fearful that'll bite you in the ass. Whereas if you take that energy and turn it into something enthusiasm, you know, then it'll go out, you know, into it. It'll go out in that form, and people always take it as they want to take it. You can't control how people take what you do. You can only control what you put out there. Like there was a lot of these metal bands that put out this, the stuff in the 80s when they were, well, I can't really control what I do. It's like, you can, I understand this is what you do, but you got to kind of own it, And so it was my kind of thing to make sure that whatever I put out there would be relatively positive, not in a phony kind of up with people kind of way. It was just like translating the experiences of, through living life and just relating to it on a personal level. And it's funny because the songs I thought would be most personal that nobody would get turned out to be the songs that everybody loved. Like Easy, like I Believe, like Jenny Says, even, I was like, nobody's gonna get this. This is just my experience. And those are the things that people are just like, oh, I get that. So I mean, and thank you for using the Easy. That's I'm
Oh,
really proud of
I
that one.
love it. I mean, it's just great energy, and I've worked with a lot of different populations in that capacity, and it just a lot of people they stop and listen. They're like, "Who is this? What is this?" And so hopefully, I've turned some people onto the band too.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate that. It's funny because as kind of the veil is being lifted on the world we live in these days, you find how it's amazing to see how manipulated we are pretty much almost out of the womb, kind of
Mm.
you're taught what to think, you're taught how to feel, by forces you don't, a lot of times you don't even see, it's like, because I was talking to somebody recently about how I remembered being on a major label in the 90s and 2000s and how like rap culture was just kind of, I love those records and everything like that, but it was so weird because like if these labels would buy these major labels would buy these little rap labels, and if the records didn't sell, the Suge Knight type person or whoever would come in and beat the hell out of the radio guys at the big label, and the police were never called. These people would end up in the hospital and stuff like that. And I didn't realize, that it was all kind of to push that agenda, to push that kind of idea of emotional, you know, negatives, and how that is kind of pushed on, all of us at an early age where you don't even recognize it. It wasn't until I had kids that I realized, oh my God, they're after them. Like from, even like almost from the womb. And
Yeah.
it's been a very eye-opening thing, especially as you pay attention to kind of what's really going on, to see, um, like the idea of like what was it? Ice Cube said in an interview recently that 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 a lot of the peoples who own the major record labels, also had owned the private prison systems. Well, I was aware of that stuff kind of in the 90s. It was like, that's not good at all. What the hell is going on here? And I'm really, it fills me with so much pride that you used one of our songs, something that's really personal to me, to kind of people say, okay, yeah, you might have gotten a raw deal. This this situation forced you to make poor choices. Okay, now you know more about the game, make better choices. Because I did that in my own life. It's like once when I realized like, okay, you know, choosing to take this path, you know, with my career and my life might actually put me in a position to where I don't get all the shiny things. I don't get all the, you know, I don't get the jets and the money and stuff like that, you know, and you know, and very consciously understanding that making that choice, you know, would kind of um, lessen my opportunities, you know, to a certain extent. But then I
Yeah.
realized, you know, it's like, okay, and that hit me hard. It was like, well, okay, and you know, but I realized that wasn't something I really needed or wanted anyway. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, look, those things are nice. I have a lot of rich friends who are millionaires, billionaires. They have all the baubles, and it's nice. You know, sometimes when you let them take you to dinner, it's nice, it's good. But you know, it's, you know,
Yeah.
for me, it was just kind of like, okay. John and I were talking about this recently. Like we had a conversation about a year, saying basically how fortunate we were that while we were, you know, while the band has reached a certain level, we never really reached that insane level to where it came back and bit us on the ass too much. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
just life, you know, it's always going to
Yeah.
bite you in the ass. But
Right.
it, you know, that kind of like we were kind of like saying we really got lucky. We dodged a lot of bullets. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's a long answer to a short question. So
No, no, that's
I
what we're here
tend to
for.
ramble. I tend to ramble.
So now that you've done the book, did
I
your aunt
can't
or
tell
anyone
you.
else whisper?
I can't tell you how proud that makes me when you told me you played easy for prisoners, and that's awesome. That is
Yeah,
awesome.
no, yeah. So are people pushing for a sequel? Or do your kids want a new book, or is your
No,
aunt
not
still in your
really.
ear?
Nobody's
No.
really asked. You know, I mean, you know, I tend to kind of take things like that as they come.
Okay.
The publishing house got sold to a much bigger publishing house, so there's not that personal attention to it anymore, which is fine.
Mm.
You know, these things
Okay.
happen.
Yeah.
So I'm just glad that it exists. I'm glad that, you know, it's available for people to buy. You know, I tend to kind of, you know, a lot of the songs I'm really proud of stuff are not songs that became our biggest hits. You know, like
Right.
you know, and it's kind of like they're little nuggets for people to go find here and there. I kind of look at the book as something like that. You know, if you want it, it's right there. You know, it's right
Right.
there. You
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
everybody, you know, we're all taking our own paths, our own ways in life, and you know, you find things, you know, that hit you that you don't expect. It kind of like you said that, you know, easy. I'm sorry to go back on that, but that's
No, I'm happy. I'm happy you're happy. But I mean, but you have an opportunity to kind of scratch your writing itch whenever you want to. It's not like
oh
like a
yeah,
Stephen King who has to put out a 900-page book whenever he feels like telling a
no,
story. You
no,
can
no, nothing
do a
like that. I can
3-minute
do that.
song and yeah. So
I
that
wrote
I
a
guess
book of
that's a
short
difference.
stories in the early 2000s, and I wrote a book of short stories, and a buddy of mine had some printed, but I never really did anything with them.
Hmm.
And two of the stories are on YouTube. One of them is called "Always Give Thanks," and it's me reading a story over a musical background. And then another one is called Madison, which is about the first time I ever tangibly discovered that I was glad to be alive. Like a moment where I was in that old band and we were almost killed by some drivers who we were trying to get a ride with, and it turned out that they were all on LSD, and so you know we were almost literally killed. And I just had this realization during the show we played that night. It's like, man, I'm really glad to be alive at this moment, you know. And then it was like, and then I said it during the show. It was like, okay, okay. It was like really just a eye-opening, mind-blowing thing that, you know, you didn't have to trudge through life, that it was actually something you could be grateful for. And I just never had that realization before. So you can find those on YouTube. One is, it's listed as Cowboy Mouth, Always Give Thanks, or Cowboy Mouth, Madison.
Okay.
So
All right. Well, definitely I'll
if you
recommend
like my
people
writing, you
look.
might enjoy that. So.
Oh yeah, no, it's. I mean, everything. I mean, I'm trying to be a completist, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's new when you come to Boston. And we
Cool.
hope that people go to cowboymouth.com because you're
Well,
all
what
over
I'll
the
do is I'll
place.
dig. I did some of those things. I'll find some of the MP3s of the other things I did, and I'll send them to you. I'll send you.
Oh, that's
You
great.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll send it to you. And you can do with
Yeah.
them
Love to
whatever
share
you
'em.
wish.
Love to share. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll definitely be seeing you in a few weeks. I hope people go to cowboymouth.com, especially if they're new fans, and discover the great music and your great message.
Well, thanks.
And we hope that everybody will come back for the next edition of the of the Writer's Block, and go Saints.
Go Saints! I got to say one more thing, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure, sure.
The guys, ever since the first days of the band, the guys that I've played with, and sometimes the women I've played with, musically, have always been have always been generous towards me in allowing me to kind of pursue this whole idea of spreading something genuinely, what I feel is genuinely life affirming through this kind of music that isn't always considered to be uh, something that would kind of, be life affirming.
Hmm.
I was about to use the word illuminating, but that word has so many weird contexts these days.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
just kind of, the idea of using rock and roll to spread uh, joy, and everybody, even people I disagreed with in the band, everybody has been very generous about, allowing me to take this energy and put it out through performance, through recording, through all that stuff, and so got to give a heads up to everybody in that area too.
I think for better for worse, people need it these days. So I hope that more people jump on the bandwagon, as it were.
Yeah, I
You
think
deserve it.
there's
You've been at it a long time, spreading the good message, and it's great stuff.
well, every day above ground, right, Matt?
That's right. You got to be grateful. Got to be grateful.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to have you on the show. Grateful to have you folks here. Hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Come say hello, all right?
Yes, sir.
We're going to Boston soon.
Yeah. See you soon.